Hi guys! 2 weeks ago I made a video about how to move your camera using easy to find household items or kind of cheap filmmaking equipment. And today we're going to take a look at how you can enhance the emotion and the story within your scene using camera movement. Obviously camera movement is one of the many parts that make up cinematography, and even so, I know that when I'm talking about cinematography, it sounds like I'm trying to, it's when I'm giving meaning to every repetition of the word "r" and some Shakespeare stuff. But I do think that in film, it does make a difference. And that's because I think that film is a language that speaks to the subconscious, and the subconscious will absorb all those little details and that you will put in with the cinematography into your image. And that will feed into the conscious's perception of the story. So I do think that cinematography does make a big difference to the audience's enjoyment of your film. So apart from that, let's get into it. So the first move is the push-in using a slider. Now the push-in is one of the most common filmmaking camera moves that you will ever find in cinema history, I think. Everybody uses it in every single film. And it's a great way to add both a little bit more of intimacy between the audience and the character, and also it just builds up so much tension within the scene. So it can really be like the drawing of the bow before releasing the arrow, before getting to the climax of the scene. And it can be used in a kind of getting the audience to feel uncomfortable about the character, or it can be made to make the audience share the same emotion as the character within the scene, because you're drawing the audience into the character's world. I think one of the great uses of the push-in, the slow dolly-in, is in Die Hard, when the Mr. Tedadaki guy is talking to Snape, and at the beginning the camera is on sticks, and as the conversation is it's not that conflicty. I mean, it's pretty conflicty because he's talking to a terrorist, but it's not super tense. Instead, then, as the conflict becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's murder in the foresight, the camera starts moving in slowly, and that adds so much more tension. And then, like the drawing of the bow, and then the terrorist does kill him, so that's the releasing of the bow and the climax of the scene. So that's a great use of it. In fact, a cool way to even emphasize the push-in is to add a zoom, and this is called dolly zoom or Zolly. It was invented by Hitchcock and used first by him in his movie Vertigo, but it's being used, in my opinion, the best by Spielberg in Jaws, when the police guy is just relaxing on the beach and then he sees the shark eating some people in the water. And you see this massive Zolly that just shocks the whole audience and just makes them really scared, and it really shocks them. Basically what it is that as you dolly in, you zoom out, or you dolly out, you zoom in. And what it does is the character in the frame actually stays in the same position and is in the same size. But the background will do something weird. It will either flood the frame, or it will completely go out of the frame, depending on whether you dolly in and zoom out, or dolly out and zoom in. And it really looks quite interesting. I think they used it also in Goodfellas in a much more subtle way to add some more tension. And Hitchcock used it in Vertigo for a very fast and very kind of jarring look. So it's a cool tool to have. I don't think I've seen some films in which people do overuse it, though. I think that's not the way it should be used. I think some people just go on YouTube, they see it, they think it looks awesome, and then in every scene in which the character is reacting to something, they put it in. And that doesn't really work. That's not how it should be used, I don't think. It should be used very sparingly and in situations that really need it. And then in those situations, it really does give a lot of power to that scene. But anyway, it's a great tool to have. Next, crane shots. Obviously, as an indie filmmaker, you're not going to really have massive cranes, which in Hollywood movies are usually used to go from a vista and fall perfectly on the scene, just to enter the scene. Doesn't really add anything, though. But you're not going to really have that. You're probably going to have maybe smaller jibs. You can get those pretty cheap on eBay or Amazon or something. And you can get some much more subtle moves, or if you don't have that, you can just use a Steadicam. I usually do that. Steadicams are awesome, so you can do that. But usually with crane moves, you go either from the floor up or from the sky to the floor. And going from the floor up will give the character a feeling of being lost or being lonely, and will really separate the audience from the character. I was seeing 127 hours, or 125 hours only, and it was a great shot in which James Franco's stuck in the canyon, and then the camera goes from being with him in the scene to shooting up through the canyon and going into the sky, and just you can see a super vista shot of how lonely he is and how it's going to be very difficult for him to be saved. So that's a great use of it. The opposite of that is going from the sky to the ground, and this will give you a much more empowering look and give the character lots of dominance. I mean, the angle, the going from the bottom to the up, that angle there has been associated with dominance for ages in cinema. Orson Welles and Citizen Kane had to dig a hole in the ground to put the camera in to get the angle he wanted, or stuff like that. But loads of people have used that angle to give dominance to the character, and also have used the angle going from the top to the bottom to give loneliness to the character as well. So that's always been done, but using a crane will also just enhance that emotion. It will just give that transitional shot from a normal situation to being lonely, or normal situation to being very, very dominant, or something like that. And next, going off sticks and going into more handheld stuff. Obviously, there's going to be a great difference between using a smooth glide cam and a handheld look. A smooth glide cam is going to give a very dreamy and smooth look, which is usually more associated with the lighter genres, or a much more epic scene in the other genres. Or instead, handheld look will give a much more jarring and edgy look, which is very good for tense action and drama, and it works really well. Let's say if the character's being run after by some people with guns and there's just no way he's going to survive, that edgy look is going to really enhance that scene a lot. So that's the way to use it. However, I think that people sometimes overuse it in, let's say, fight scenes. I mean, in fight scenes, people do use it a lot if their actors are not up to the standard that they need the fight scene to actually be in. So, I mean, obviously, if you have somebody that does not know how to fight and you tell them to punch somebody, it's going to look terrible if you have a wide shot on a tripod. Instead, if you go in really close and have it super shaky, it's going to look pretty cool. Instead, if you've got some really good actors, there really is no point to go shaky. It will just completely take away from their skill and what you really want in the scene. I was seeing a film that perfectly explains this, and this was, I think, an entry for a Film Riot Monday Challenge some years back, and it was just these two boys karateing the hell out of each other, and they were really, really good fighters. I don't know how they were so good. They were absolutely amazing, and but the camera was shaking all over the place, so you could not see anything that they were doing, and that really took away from the scene. So that's a great example. If you have the actors, just keep the cinematography simple. Instead, if you have less good actors, you really should dive into the cinematography to give it that emotion. But yeah. So that's it. Please leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and like. And see you next week.